One, thank you and welcome back to our Fall 2022 University of Illinois Press Publishing Symposium. I'm Lori Matheson, Director of the University of Illinois Press, and I am really delighted that we're here for this wonderful panel. I hope you were able to join us last hour for our session on publishing strategies for career advancement. It was an incredibly rich conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm really grateful to that panel for their time and expertise. If you did happen to miss that session, or if you want to revisit it or recommend it to others, the recording will be available within a few days on our website as part of our archive of publishing symposia and resources. So please visit early and often. Take advantage of those resources. So our first session provided wide-ranging advice about how academics can make smart decisions concerning publishing in support of their careers. Our second session, entitled Crossing Over Strategies for Pursuing Careers in Publishing, will offer perspectives from 4 industry professionals on careers in academic publishing. We often have academics reach out to us asking about publishing as a career. Scholarly publishing is an academic adjacent industry, and there are many ways in which academic accomplishment and expertise apply in a publishing context. There also are skills and expertise specific to publishing as a profession. Just as academic expertise is accumulated through training, study, and experience, many publishing professionals gain expertise through publishing institutes, certificates and degree programs in publishing, and technical training in graphic design, copy editing, typesetting, or other kinds of professional skills. In both settings, there's also a lot of learning by doing. Many academics exploring crossing over to publishing set their sights on a book acquisitions position, but there are many different kinds of work in a publishing house and many different doors by which to enter. I encourage everyone on this call to keep an open mind and remember that your entry point into publishing is not always the track you stay on. I myself have worked in both commercial and scholarly publishing, in development, marketing, and acquisitions, as well as in my current role as an administrator. And scholarly publishing encompasses both book and journal outputs, both of which have a plethora of different kinds of work. Our panelists today will be sharing their stories of the paths they have taken to and through their publishing careers. They will be providing information about various kinds of publishing work and skill sets, and they will be offering advice about how to gain experience in publishing, including while in graduate school. I know we will learn a lot from their stories and advice, and I'm excited to turn the floor over to our panel and to our chair, Allison Searing. And thank you to everybody for being here.
Thank you, Lori, and I wanted to welcome everybody again to this panel. So I'll be chairing and moderating this panel. So first I wanted to mention that we do really want audience participation questions from all of you. So if you do have any as we progress, please feel free to put those specifically in the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer some of those as we go along. We'll also have some time at the end, we're planning to take audience questions in case things don't come up naturally as our conversation progresses. So first, I thought we would start with introducing ourselves. I think you can often learn the most about how to pursue a career in publishing by just talking to people about their own career trajectory. So we'll each mention our academic background and degree, our paths into publishing, how our careers developed, and our current positions. So I'll go ahead and start. My academic background is in history and English literature, which I pursued at the bachelor level. And then I also have a master's degree in writing and an MFA in creative writing from Illinois. My path into publishing is a little creative, like I think many of ours is in different ways. I did a number of internships, both for scholarly presses and independent publishers, a literary agent during my undergraduate career. During graduate school, I was lucky enough to have an internship at the University of Illinois Press. So that further polished some skills and also let me know about some other careers in publishing that I didn't know about. So after that period, I was able to apply for an assistant acquisitions editor position at the press. I had that for about 3 years and then was promoted into acquisitions editor position, which I now have. And I primarily acquire in history and religion now. So you'll see that I do have somewhat of a background, academic background in history, but I don't have a degree in religion. So that's definitely been something that I've had to learn on the job, like many of us have to learn our areas of acquisitions. So now I'll pass it over to Claire and she can go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here on this panel. My name is Claire Eater. I currently work as a production coordinator at the University Press of Kentucky. And I started out academically. I pursued creative writing degrees, an MFA and a PhD. And during that time, I also took on an internship at a University Press. I was involved with literary journals, and I worked in a couple different writing centers. I was working freelance editing, writing also, so that was helpful. But I think really the most pivotal thing for me was the internship with the University Press of Florida that I did while I was in my master's degree. Really gave me insight into the kind of work environment at a university press and what the day-to-day work is like. And that gave me the encouragement to, after I finished up my PhD, look into careers in scholarly publishing. And I applied to just all kinds of different positions and wound up working in marketing at the University of Wisconsin Press in the journals division. Then fast forward to now, we recently moved to Kentucky. And so with that, I ended up taking a position here at the University Press of Kentucky in production. So it's a bit of a change for me to a new part of publishing, but I'm really enjoying it.
Thank you. Jeremy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jeremy Matthews. I am Senior Acquisitions Editor at the MIT Press. I acquire in physics, chemistry, engineering, and math, all the physical sciences primarily. So my path, I'm going to wager it's probably the weirdest of us all. I did a PhD in chemical engineering, and then I did a postdoc. And while I was looking for a job in industry, I discovered a job as a science journalist with Physics Today magazine. A few years being there, I became the books columnist, and that's where I discovered how publishing worked. I would be sent books by publishers like the MIT Press. Then I would find reviewers, they would review them. And so I got a little bit of an understanding of how publishing worked. I'm a book lover, as I think all of us are. And so I was a reader and a book lover, but I didn't really understand the business of publishing. And in 2016, Amy Brand actually recruited me to the press. She heard about me through a mutual acquaintance, and she has a PhD in neuroscience, and she made a leap directly into acquisitions as I did. So I think she figured that it could be done. She had done it before. And so when the opportunity came up, I thought it was great because I was looking for a new opportunity. I had a lot to learn. And I'll talk more about my path and how it's evolved over the 6 years I've been at the MIT Press. But the main thing is that I've learned is that a big part of being a successful acquisitions editor is understanding how to communicate with the other departments, like production, like Claire in production. So that's something that I've had to learn over the years, and it's been a good ride so far. Glad to be here.
And finally, Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Burton, and I actually work at the University of Illinois Press, so I know Allison well. My degree is in, my bachelor's degree is in journalism, and then I got a master's degree in history. I knew that I wanted to do something other than teach because I was pursuing my PhD, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet. So what I did was I tried as many different jobs as I could when I was in graduate school. So I worked in archives. I was a teaching assistant. I worked on research projects. And then I got an assistantship in the library in the archive. So I was able to process collections. And so I was intending to go into archives and get my library science degree. And I also worked on a graduate student journal. I helped develop that. And so there was an opening at the press for a part-time job in the copy editing department. And I applied not really thinking I was going to get it because I figured only English majors worked there. But actually what they wanted was somebody who understood scholarship, and they wanted someone who they thought that they published a lot of history, and so they thought that having a historian would be a good idea to work in copy editing. So initially I started working as in a part-time position, and then they opened up a full-time position, and I became an assistant editor an associate editor to the managing editor. And then later I left the press, worked freelance for about 4 years doing developmental editing and copy editing. And then I became an assistant managing editor at Illinois, and then later became a managing editor in Indiana. And now I work as the intellectual property manager at Illinois again.
Thank you all. So as you've noticed, we have a wide array, both of jobs currently in academic publishing, but also in career trajectories and how we all got here, what our academic background and what our publishing background looks like. So I think it's a very exciting panel. So we had a great discussion earlier this month and came up with some questions we thought are commonly either topics or issues that people have when they think about applying for academic publishing jobs. So the first one that we discussed is the fact that there isn't always support for academic adjacent jobs in traditional graduate school programs, which anticipate that those who graduate will go on to be professors. So how can students gain skills and experience necessary for jobs in scholarly publishing? I'm happy for whoever would like to take that up first.
I can start that. I think that when talking to people who are in publishing, the job trajectories differ so widely, and I think that when I was in school, I don't think there was as much support for people to go into adjacent jobs. So a lot of people thought that you needed to go into academia or you were wasting your degree. So I think now there's a different idea. So I think actually reaching out to your department and trying to get your department to work with other places on campus. We have an internship program that we work with other academic departments, and I think an internship is actually the best way to see if it's something you might want to do. Some people try it and they don't like it. They don't think it's there for them, and so it doesn't waste a lot of your time if you work in an internship and then realize, oh, this isn't something I want, or if you really love it and then you can, try different things. And I think if you show enthusiasm at the press you're interning at, most people are extremely helpful in trying to get you as much information and training as possible. I had an intern who at another press who basically just worked from department to department to department, and she ended up working in copy editing and in acquisitions, and now she's in marketing. She had at another press in a professional position. So I think if you're able to get an internship, just try to take advantage of it as much as possible, because people who work in publishing tend to be the most evangelistic about being in publishing. They always really want to mentor as much as possible.
I would add to Angela's advice to reach out to your department. Even if you are at a university that maybe isn't affiliated with a university press, your department might be able to put you in touch with alum who are working in scholarly publishing, and they would maybe be willing to do an informational interview with you, or just, have an email exchange where you can ask them some questions. So I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, I mean, if the question is, how do you cross over? I would suggest you don't do what I did, which is wait for someone to recruit you, because that's not going to happen. It's super rare, and I was lucky. I think most people who go into publishing with no experience start at the bottom, and by the bottom, I mean interning. Well, I don't know if there's volunteering, but there's certainly interning. There are other ways to get in, but I think mainly you do need to speak to people on the inside. The people in publishing are very accessible. That's not the issue. The skills are, I think, relatively easy to learn, but I think what you really need to do is communicate enthusiasm for wanting to learn it and wanting to really be someone who's long-term in publishing, because there's so much institutional knowledge that you have to learn, and I've had to learn that. There's a lot of institutional knowledge you need to learn, and you should be resilient and be willing to learn all of it, and also be willing to be critical about how you view books and the book process and all aspects of the book. You can't be single-tracked, only focus on writing. You have to be sensible to marketing, sales, all of the things, because there's so much interworking between the departments in publishing.
Those are all excellent points. And I should also point out that there are some free organizations out there that you might be interested in. One recently started called Paths in Publishing, or PIP. So it's really important that, we acknowledge that there is sometimes a barrier there to getting internships, which can be really difficult to secure, or, for example, paying for a publishing degree, which can be really expensive and doesn't guarantee a job. But there are some free or low cost methods out there. Claire mentioned informational interviews, or again, a program like Paths in Publishing, which gives you access to people who work in scholarly publishing, and who might be able to kind of open doors for you or give you some more of that insider knowledge that's really important. So thank you. Those were all really great tips. So I think our second question kind of goes off of that. And you may have noticed in our introductions that some of us have graduate school work in different areas, some of us don't. So to what extent is formal postgraduate education necessary for a job in academic publishing? Claire, would you like to start this one?
Sure. So I will say that the job that I'm in currently does not require any postgraduate education. I think that I actually just was looking at the job posting, and it's, bachelor degree. So, but I do think that, doing the PhD and the MFA were helpful for me in building skills and getting that access to learning about publishing, having an internship, that sort of thing. But I would say, depending on what type of area within publishing you're looking at, it's not totally necessary, and most people that I work with do not have those degrees. So
Yeah, I mean, my initial instinct was to say that it's not needed, but I think it is beneficial for one reason mainly, which is most of the authors, especially of an academic press, are scholars in academia. And if you have postgraduate level experience and knowledge, that's helpful to understand your authors and their perspectives and how academia works and how scholarly publishing works. Maybe you've already published a paper, so you're familiar with that process, and you're familiar with the process of evaluating those types of works. But if you, and that's of course more so in acquisitions, but I think it would apply to people in other departments as well, but especially acquisitions, I would say it would be helpful.
I think also, especially in a university press background, I mean, I don't have a PhD, I'm ABD, so I didn't finish my dissertation primarily because I got a full-time job and couldn't do everything at once. It was just not right for not at the time for my research that I was working on. But I think, you know, in a university, I think especially if you want to go into administration, the people who are hiring administrators are often academics. And so a PhD is just, you know, it's not necessary for the job, but it's something that they understand. Just it's the culture. And so I think it can be beneficial, especially when you're going into like a director position.
Thank you. So we do have a couple of questions I thought we could go ahead and look at. So one of our questions is, so is it advisable to seek out internships at university presses if one already has a PhD or several years in a faculty role? And do you have advice on securing one of those internships?
I mean, I think if you have a PhD in several years in a faculty role, you may be able to skip the internship process, depending on if you want, especially if you want to acquire in your field, which is what I'm doing. I'm acquiring in my field. I'm acquiring in a field where I have networks in that community, and that's huge. If you want to go into marketing and your background is in maybe something else that's not related, maybe an internship would help. But that's just my perspective. Love to hear from the others.
Also, you know, if you're interested in publishing after you're an academic, I mean, there's also the opportunity perhaps to do journal publishing or to be an editor of a journal in your field, and certainly that's a way to move into it, or to maybe do reviews for books, you know, for acquisitions editors. And in some cases that may move into something where you're on a board, on a series board or something. So there are other ways to get on there. But if you're and I think to reaching out to a publisher, that, you know, there may be some kind of ability to do some informational work or some kind of freelance work, maybe developmental editing. But I think it's a harder road to go into because those institutions aren't created for you.
Yeah, I think that's all really great advice. Most of the internships that we have at the University of Illinois Press are primarily for students, and that could be undergraduate students or graduate students. We have several different programs, and we have one with the UIUC English department. We also have another one with a program with UIC, the PGIA internship. So there are several opportunities. You might, again, those are primarily for Illinois students at all of our campuses, but you might also check, you know, with the university you're affiliated with and see if they do have opportunities that extend beyond students. But I also agree with Jeremy. You might be able to just go and apply to opportunities, but what I usually tell people who have PhDs, either with or without experience, is that sometimes you do have to be willing to start at an entry-level role, because, you know, and I do think what Angela mentioned with getting experience, for example, doing peer reviews, or if you do have the opportunity to serve on a journal board or as a series editor, those are all really valuable experiences for publishing, and I think they would transfer well. But because the application process is usually really competitive for a lot of these jobs, you might have to be willing to do a year as an assistant in marketing or in production or in acquisitions in order to kind of build up the publishing aspect of your resume. And that's not always a great outlook for people who have a PhD to go into an assistant role at a press, but you can really learn a lot that way, and I think still move up pretty fast once you have that experience. So kind of together with that, our next question is about the application process. So do we have any advice for those navigating the application process for jobs in scholarly publishing? What might you recommend to applicants, including things for resumes and cover letters to help them stand out?
One thing I think that might be helpful if you're applying for a job at a university press, at a state school especially, we have very strict rules about hiring. And so it's important to really use the language in the job description to make sure that all those words are being used in your resume and your cover letter, because those don't go through the press initially, those go through the HR department, and then they choose the ones that go forward. And so because of that, like for example, my first job, I was doing a civil service exam for a job that I already had, that I were moving into a full-time position, and I initially didn't get a good score on it, even though I was doing the same job. And it was because I didn't use the language, the words. So I actually had to go through and I circled the words and put them in there, and I got the highest score. And it was just, that's all it was. And also including the things that you do that are volunteer. So I think initially I was my volunteer writing and editing skills that I had done, that I think got me my first job, because I was able to skip into that top 3 pool. And so I think it's really important. We find sometimes, that we might like to interview people and we didn't realize that they were in that pool. So it's really important to really pay attention to the job description and make sure that you really include skills, not just your degree, because the people who are reviewing those initial pool may not recognize all the skills that you have in your degree. We know what it takes to be a scholar, but you don't have to you're not necessarily going to be seen by by those people initially. So that's really important.
I would say this is pretty general advice, but you sort of have to forget about the technique of putting together your CV, where you're just sort of listing, your publications or your positions, and focus more on a show don't tell mentality of really demonstrating what you did that fulfills the bullet point on the job description. So showing, how can you show that you really do have those skills, and rather than just listing skills that you might have. And I found that it's actually helpful to take advantage of the resources at your university, that they might be geared towards undergraduates even, but there are usually a lot of resources about how to put together a solid resume and cover letter. And that is something to stay up to date with. It seems like it's always sort of changing, make sure your materials are up to date and are easy to scan and easy to read and all that good stuff. So I would say kind of get out of the mindset of the CV and really focus on putting together a killer resume.
I would answer the question by using 2 examples, how I applied and how my current acquisitions assistant applied. For me, coming from an untraditional background with no formal experience in publishing, what I did was I really emphasized, as Angela was saying, the skills that I had that would be particularly applicable and useful in the role that I was applying for. So certainly I had some deficiencies, but I highlighted my ability, the depth of my knowledge of the field, the depth of my knowledge of the people in the field, and my ability to communicate with people in the field. Communicated. I think that's true for almost any department, but certainly in acquisitions, you're communicating a lot with potential authors. So I emphasized that in my application. And for my assistant, she had limited experiences in publishing, but she also demonstrated that she was a resilient person who was willing to learn things she knew what she didn't know. And she emphasized that, and she said, I am learning this. And you can do that too. You can take a different tack. You don't have to ignore your deficiencies. You can, in a sense, say, I know this is where I'm deficient, because just knowing that is actually a good sign. Because you know what you need to work on, and we were convinced that she had the desire to work on those things, and those are the two examples I would give on how to apply.
Those are both really, really helpful. I think also from my experience serving on hiring committees, it's really important to actually provide the materials that are asked. We've had several applicants who maybe only send their resume, they don't send a cover letter. And especially in this HR process that we don't get to see, that could be a reason why your application package gets discarded. It's also a really valuable opportunity to translate what looks like just a job title on your resume into the actual skills that you used in that job. And I think this is particularly effective when you might not have much or even really any publishing experience, but if you can translate how those jobs may have helped you become a better communicator, or you had special attention to deadlines, you're detail oriented, you can manage time well. If you can kind of translate those job titles into those skills in your cover letter, that'll be a big step towards putting you, high in the queue of people that we're looking at. So I think those are together with these other great tips are really important. So we have a couple other really great questions coming in. So let me hop over here. So for someone who would want to begin a career in publishing but is currently working in a non-publishing job, what are some transferable skills I should highlight, or skills I should try to gain when applying to scholarly publishing positions? I think we mentioned a few of them here. I think in some ways it depends on exactly the job that you're applying for, but I think across the press, as Jeremy mentioned, being a good communicator, and that's both in person. So for example, if you have a customer service role, there is a surprising amount of customer service in the publishing industry. Also written communication. Do you send a lot of emails, or do you talk on the phone quite a bit? Those things about developing communication. But I'm happy if anybody else has things that they're particular skills that they think are most useful.
One thing that surprised me starting in a publishing job was how much my technical skills came into play. So even just working on learning how to use programs like Excel and Word to sort of the best of the options that they have to offer, like becoming sort of a power user of those programs, I think is really helpful. And in production, then you get into like Adobe programs and things like that. And you don't have to come into a role with knowledge of some kind of super specific program that's like, say, like Photoshop or something, but you just have to show that you are willing to learn and that you've explored other similar technologies. And I think that can be really helpful for pretty much any role in publishing, just showing that you're able to use those.
Great. So we have another question that I think is a great one. So when you choose a career in publishing, do you also give up your own aspirations for publishing as an author? Angela shaking her head. Would you like to answer, Angela?
Sure. I mean, I think that I've known people who have published on, I think one of our last director published a book while he was director. I don't think it's, you'll be writing at night instead of during the day, of course. But yeah, no, I don't think it would. I mean, I know people who've written books who are also in publishing. You probably with a different press, of course.
Yes, I know one acquisitions editor who published a monograph with a different press while an acquisitions editor at her press. I know multiple people who have published creative writing works. one of
Yeah,
our colleagues actually, and a previous acquisitions editor here was a poet and published while he was here. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. I think you have to be extra enthusiastic in order to do that, because as Angela mentioned, there's a lot of balance that goes on there, but you certainly don't have to give it up by any means. And also, are positions virtual, or do you need to be located in the city where your university press is located? So that is a very, right now, press to press answer. I will say at the University of Illinois Press, we have lots of people who are remote right now, including some of our interns. And I think we'll probably will continue going that way, but I know that there's other presses that have not gone that way and have continued to be primarily in person. So I don't know if Jeremy or Claire want to speak to their presses, or maybe anything you've noticed about the industry in general.
Yeah, initially we went all remote, but we're being encouraged, those of us who are local, to start coming back to the office. So I think it, as you said, simply it varies from press to press.
And here at UPK, full-time positions are required to be located in Kentucky. We do have a hybrid schedule though, so we work 2 days from home and then 3 days in the office. So there's some flexibility there.
And I will say, if you pay attention, for example, to job listings on the Association of University Presses site, which I highly recommend you look at, they are usually very clear about which ones are remote options and which one are in-person required. So the Association of University Presses, I'm going to get it wrong, aupresses.org, I believe is, but if you Google Association of University Presses, you should probably find it.
It's just, Heather just put it up.
Thank you, Heather. And so another great question from someone who has not an academic working in higher ed and administration. So as a postgraduate adult in the working world, most internships are closed to me as I'm no longer a student. And most of my background is based in teaching and tutoring. As someone facing these barriers, how might I leverage skills and gain experience to transition into academic publishing? It's a really excellent question. I can start. So I think a few of us mentioned that we had some tutoring experience. I also was a tutor during my graduate education, and that was actually one of the most useful experiences in learning how to be an acquisitions editor and how to talk to people about their writing. So I think that's a really valuable skill. Actually, I would consider that to be a publishing skill. Because even if you wanted to apply that to, editorial design or production or marketing, you still have gained some skills on how to talk to people about writing. And that's what all of us do all day, just from different perspectives. So I think that's actually an aspect of kind of taking the skills you have and maybe in a cover letter, articulating how they relate to the job you're applying for. But curious if anybody else has thoughts.
I think also I was in copy editing editorial for a long time. And so I think that really understanding the, there's opportunity sometimes to freelance for publishers, either in copy editing or in proofreading. We have freelance proofreaders, we have freelance copy editors, and it's really important for you to be able to understand styles, like documentation styles, Chicago style, APA, etc. And so usually when we would oftentimes we would be testing people as a freelancer. So for example, we'll give you a test and you'll have to fill it out, and we'll see how good of an editor you are. So it's really, really important to make that transition from being able to talk about writing and making some suggestions to actually understanding style, like the Chicago style APA. And it's really one way to find out is to go to the website of the press and see what the instructions are to authors, because they will often tell you what kind of style they require, or And that's just really helpful information if you are planning to do any kind of freelance work. And that is one way to get into the door, is to do, to be a proofreader. And that really gives you so much experience. You realize how little you know when you start proofing other people's work, and you're like, oh, I didn't even see that. I think it's just a really invaluable experience, especially if you don't want, and if you're not planning to go into acquisitions, but you're going into something else. And copy editing is wonderful. It really actually is. You really get to go really understand the work itself and shepherd it throughout the entire production. It's a great job. So, but it's important to understand that it's a different type of job than doing just like reviews. Sorry if that was too much in the weeds.
No, that was excellent. I think that's a really good point. And I mean, I freelanced for quite a long time for scholarly presses and also for independent publishers. So, if you're not immediately able to get in with a scholarly publisher, you might consider, casting your net a little wider and seeing what you can get into. And I think all of that's building publishing experience. So that's really, really great. We do have a couple of questions on salary ranges. So if we want to talk a little bit about salaries in the industry, I don't know if anybody wants to start with that. I think so. Would you mind talking about the range of salaries one can expect in the field and the time it may take to move up in an organization is one of the questions. And then also, what range of wages or salary can a person starting out in publishing expect to earn? How does this compare with wages in other academic adjacent industries?
I don't have an official answer on this, but I would say for a lot of universities, their salary ranges are you can find them on their websites. So if you see a position, you might see a number then you find a separate chart showing what level that is, and you could, in a way, find out what the range for a salary is for the position you might be applying for. But I guess it may not come as a shock that that publishing isn't the highest paying of jobs around. If you stick with it and you become really good in your niche, I think you'll be. I know you.
You're breaking up a little bit, Jeremy. Oh, we can't hear you. Oh no. Okay. Okay. So I will share a story about salary. When I was applying, so I graduated with an MFA and I really wanted to go into scholarly publishing, but I only applied for one job. So I also was looking at other jobs that were available, and a full-time lecturer position was also available at the same time. That job technically made a little bit more money, but that was basically about the most I would ever make being a lecturer, and it was quite a lot more work in terms of, I found teaching to be a lot more demanding of me in certain areas than publishing was. So I also kind of looked at that. While I ended up taking a job that was initially lower paid, my trajectory has been better than if I had stuck with just being a lecturer. So I think that's one aspect to look at, although I will agree with Jeremy that it is not, you're not going in it for the money. But it also, you can look at where different publishers are located. For example, living in Urbana, Illinois, for what we make is pretty achievable. What I make now would probably be more difficult. For example, I used to live in Washington, D.C., and that would be a lot harder. So that might be another aspect of when you're looking at applying for jobs, not only are they virtual or remote, or remote or in person, but if they are in person, and if you can understand like the salary range that they're offering, does it seem like that is going to be an achievable living wage? And I think we've been getting some pushback, I think, across university publishing recently that salaries are too low, and we're making, I know Illinois is trying to make salaries more achievable. So I know that, and there's other publishers out there who are doing the same thing. So I think we are slowly but surely being heard on that front.
I just want to add really quickly that Paths in Publishing, which Allison, I think you mentioned, they recently did a survey of publishing salaries, which is up on the web somewhere. And I think other organizations have done such surveys too. So that would be something that might be interesting to look at.
Yes, Heather just put the website on in the Q&A for if anyone wants to get to that.
And then there's also a question, are some university presses unionized? Yes, they are. I believe Oxford and Duke University is in the process of unionizing. And there are actually some positions at the University of Illinois Press, specifically in our business office, who are part of the union, of larger university-wide union. So that that is sometimes the case. So we can travel back to our questions. I think we have time for one more. So we've talked a little bit about the application process, but focusing less on maybe the resume portion, but maybe more about some of like the soft skills that potential candidates might have. What skills and traits do hiring committees look for in a potential job candidate, regardless of the position? And then speaking to individual departments like acquisitions, marketing, and production, what do these departments look for in successful candidates? Claire, would you like to start?
Sure, yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on this. One thing in production, when I was interviewing for my current position, my now supervisor made it really clear that she was looking for someone who was a creative problem solver. And I thought, oh, okay, well, this sounds great because that's something that I really enjoy to do. So that might be something like, we need to get this book to the printer within a certain time frame, and how can we make that happen, or how can we manipulate certain files so that they are the dimensions that we need them to be, things like that. So I find that a really fun challenge. And then also, what was the other one I was thinking about? Attention to detail is pretty important, I think, in a lot of parts of publishing, and then especially within editorial design and production, being able to catch little things that come up, but also being flexible and being aware of the big picture so that you're keeping costs and time and schedules and all that in mind while you're reviewing and looking for errors. Pretty important.
I was looking at some of our jobs recent searches, and I know one thing that we focus on a lot is flexibility and curiosity, and making sure that people are not wedded to one idea of publishing, that we want someone who's a creative problem solver, and that's that they want to be a team player, because the thing about publishing is that you are working with so many different departments, and every department is important in the publication of a book. And so you really want someone who can work well with other people and who are respectful and, respect other people. That's really important, because I mean, I've worked in places where departments are at loggerheads, and it just makes everyone's job 10 times harder. So we really want people to be able to look at the job at hand and not make problems.
And I would echo what Claire and Angela said. Allison, how's my sound, by the way? Okay, good. If you look at the application for a job in publishing, regardless of department, there are a lot of things that you need to do, and you actually do all those things. So you have to be a person that's able to do all the things. And as Claire said, I would call it project management, right? It's you're project managing a project or a product that sometimes takes years to come to fruition. And so you have to be on top of that. Dates, costs, You're doing the editing sometimes, so there are a lot of things going on, and you have to be a person who can handle that. We mentioned communications before, be able to present as well to each other, not just deal with customers, external customers. And I would say a big bonus is just be a book nerd. I mean, if you come in and you're familiar with scholarly publishing and some of the hit books or some of the presses and what they do and what they specialize in, if you're a book nerd, I think that's a big bonus. Or a publishing nerd, I should say.
No, those are all really excellent. So our final question, you've all held different jobs in publishing. How have you developed in one position in ways that prepared you for the next?
I think that it's really important, and regardless of what position you have, is to really think of publishing in a holistic way. I mean, when I went into publishing, I kind of treated it like this is my new research project. And so I like read all the research projects, read all the research papers about publishing. Where are we moving? Are we moving into open access? Are we moving, what are the technical skills that we're going to be needing? All of these kinds of things are really helpful to make yourself a well-rounded person and to know what you need to do for your own professional development, because and then to advocate for that professional development. If you need technical skills, you need to be able to, advocate that the press might want to spend some money on that for you, or go to conferences when those are available. But really think of publishing as in a large way rather than just your own position. Because and also really, if you're not remote, to really try to get to know people in other departments, get to know how their jobs differ from yours, how they're the same, and really advocate for good relations between departments. So it's really very, very important. Because someone you may disagree with now might be your boss tomorrow.
And then just to quickly echo what Angela said, develop a deep appreciation for the whole ecosystem of publishing, because every part of publishing matters to the success of a book, to the success of the press, to the success of that author, to your own success. So just humility, and with that humility, you'd be able to reach and make, well, not necessarily you can make friends, but you can certainly at least develop a good working relationship with people that are not in your department, because they are critical to your success and to everyone's success.
And remember, the book is important. This scholar has put 10 years of their life into writing that book, and you want that experience to be a good one for that author, as well as and to get that research out to the public. And so your job matters, no matter if whatever you're doing.
One thing to add too would be identifying what it is in your current position that really makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. What do you really enjoy about the work that you do? Even if maybe you are in an entry-level position that's not the best fit for you, what is it that you see about the work that you do and about publishing and just what you're encountering that you find most fascinating, and then trying to build that into your current position, or looking forward, how can you maybe transition to another area of publishing or another position that would allow you to do that. So for me, I really enjoyed looking at, I was in marketing, so I love designing materials and working in InDesign. And so I was able to sort of transition over to production, where doing some of that technical work is really important.
Those are all really great examples. I think another one in terms of transitioning, I think, from an assistant level to like a full editor role, or even in any department, you know, starting out as an assistant and then moving to that full role, is really taking advantage of your managers. And similarly to how this panel has functioned, you know, get to know how they got into their position and what helps them do their job every day, and how, you know, in acquisitions, how do they go about acquiring books? How do they learn about their fields? How do they make connections and build relationships, which is a lot of what acquisitions is about. And I think through learning about that, you can learn about how, you know, there's options for how you do your job and how can you make it your own. And another tip I thought was really interesting that I saw at another panel was to kind of keep data on yourself. You know, keep track of the projects, you know, how many contracts, how many book contracts have you gotten this year? How many books have you transmitted? For some editors, those are required things that we keep track of, but even keeping track of things, you know, like the panels that you've served on, or you know, external, for example, service to the AU Presses community. Keeping track of those can also help you see how much that you've done and how much you've grown. It can give you confidence actually in applying to that next role, which I think sometimes that intimidation is the biggest factor in kind of making that move. So the more that you can see what you've done, how you've developed, can be really helpful. So I know we're nearing the end of our time, and I'm sure that we didn't get to all the possible questions that you might have. I will put my email in the chat, so if anyone does have extra questions and they'd like to reach out, feel free to. I like talking about publishing all day, every day, so I'm always happy to answer questions, or, you know, talk about jobs or anything like that. So feel free to let me know. And thank you so much for joining us, and also to the panelists for a great conversation. And I will hand it back to Lori.
Thanks, Allison. I just really want to thank the four of you, Allison, Claire, Angela, and Jeremy, for being here. I've learned things, and I bet you our participants learned a lot from this conversation today. I really appreciate your advice and just sharing candidly about scholarly publishing and about your work. So thank you, and thanks to everyone who is here today, and have a great evening. Thank you.